Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, September 8th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and we begin tonight with yet another grim milestone in the COVID crisis. More than 40 million cases have been reported nationwide, and infections among children are spiking. KPBS reporter Melissa May shows us the efforts today to get our community vaccinated.
More than 250,000 childhood cases were reported last week. That's more than a quarter of the total number of cases reported over that period.
It's a lot of cases, and it needs to go down real quick, or we're not going to end this anytime soon.
Esmeralda Gamboa is a 10th grader at Steel Canyon High School in Spring Valley, where 11 cases have been reported among students as of today. Now that she is back in school, she decided to get the vaccine.
It's important to get vaccinated and to keep others safe and myself safe.
Gamboa got her shot at a pop-up clinic at SeaWorld San Diego. The theme park partnered with the city of San Diego and Sharp Healthcare to offer the vaccines. Erica DeProfio is the VP of Marketing for SeaWorld and was happy to see people lining up to get vaccinated.
Everyone knows where we're located. We have such wonderful space. Parking is ample and free. And on top of that, we wanted to give back.
For anyone that gets vaccinated today, they get not one, but 2 free tickets to SeaWorld's Hallow Scream event, their first ever nighttime Halloween extravaganza.
DeProfio has 2 little ones of her own.
As a family, we try to stay as safe and healthy as possible, and we also don't want to make others around us sick, or even our children's grandparents who are older, and we want to make sure that they stay healthy as well.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, the White House chief medical advisor, is concerned about the children who may be too young to get vaccinated.
We've got to get the school system masked, in addition to surrounding the children with vaccinated people.
With cases and hospitalizations on the rise, President Joe Biden plans to address the nation on Thursday about the next step in his pandemic response. Melissa May, KPBS News.
And late today, Steel Canyon High School updated its number of COVID-19 cases amongst students. It is now at 13. For the latest on the pandemic and resources, check out the Tracking COVID-19 section at kpbs.org, and that includes details on vaccines, the latest case numbers, and our local reporting. You can get there by clicking the link that you can find on our homepage. County leaders are announcing a new framework to address drug use and mental health in jails. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman says the goal of the program is to stop the cycle of drug use, which officials say will save lives and make our communities safer.
If we don't have this investment, then all of the other things we are doing are not going to be nearly as effective as they should.
County officials are shifting what they do in jails, spending $25 million to address the underlying causes of addiction and mental health during and continuing after incarceration.
Right now, we have very limited medically assisted treatment programs in the jails, primarily for our pregnant females.
Under Sheriff Kelly Martinez says around 160 county health workers will be brought into jails, offering treatment to inmates who have substance abuse issues.
Right now, they don't have any kind of program that'll bring them down off of those drugs. They just have to come off of the drugs on their own. So this will provide them some other medications that will make that easier.
The new plan calls for people to be screened for substance abuse disorders, then be offered participation in the treatment program. County Behavioral Health Services Director Luke Bergman says if people accept, they will be offered medication prescribed by a doctor.
That medication has huge amounts of evidence behind it. It really, really works. It works in community settings. Evidence has demonstrated that. It works in jail settings.
Bergman says just having people going through withdrawals is not ideal.
They will often be at elevated risk of relapse if they have had opioid use disorder, and also at elevated risk of overdose and overdose death.
Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, who helped get funding and additional staff for the program, gave a hypothetical example of a heroin user going through withdrawals in jail.
there's nothing that is dealing with that underlying issue. And so when they get released, they go back out on the street, and the first thing that they have to do is go find heroin. But their tolerance has been lowered because they've been incarcerated. And so the mortality tables will show you're more likely to overdose if you were in jail.
Part of the program involves offering treatment after people are released from jail. The changes haven't started yet, and officials say it will take some time to implement them countywide. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
A bill aimed at ending the careers of bad law enforcement officers is now awaiting Governor Newsom's signature. State lawmakers gave their final approval today, a year after an earlier effort failed without reaching a final vote. The legislation creates a new mandatory state license or certification that could be permanently revoked. It also allows for suspending the license and requires a 2/3 vote for decertification. One of San Diego County's former top doctors is suing, alleging he was retaliated against and fired due to disability discrimination. Dr. Nick Ephantides was the county's chief medical officer for more than a decade and one of the most visible officials leading the region's response to the pandemic early on. He says after working around the clock relating to the COVID response, he broke down, suffering depression and anxiety, which resulted in him taking a medical leave.
When I returned, it was clear to me that I was viewed by the county as damaged goods. And within a few months, the county fired me because I had sought some emotional and mental refuge.
His attorneys allege after the medical leave, county officials demanded he take a fitness test, which wasn't completed before he was let go. Dr. Nick is seeking damages relating to loss of his job, emotional distress, and embarrassment. A county spokesperson told us they don't comment on pending litigation. This week is recognized nationally as Suicide Prevention Week. The burdens of the pandemic have weighed heavy on many, which is why the County of San Diego is asking people to check in on their loved ones. KPBS reporter Alexandra Rangel has more.
The County Suicide Prevention Council released its annual report on the status of suicides. Last year, the county recorded a total of 419 deaths by suicide. That number is lower than the previous year, with a total of 429 suicide deaths. Mental health experts with the county say suicide is one of the few leading causes of death that is preventable. County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher says erasing the stigma associated with mental health is where it begins.
To get to a place as a society where people are just as comfortable getting help or treatment for depression as they are for diabetes. A place where we recognize that schizophrenia is not different than high blood pressure.
This year, the county made efforts to improve crisis response by dispatching behavioral health experts to emergency calls instead of law enforcement. The county also outlined the benefits telehealth platforms have created by increasing access to services during the pandemic. The county behavioral health director, Dr. Luke Bergman, says the pandemic exposed the inequities correlated with mental health.
Rates of psychological distress among people in lower income brackets are especially high, both during the pandemic and in previous years.
Across demographics, Bergman says psychological distress was 200 times worse amidst the pandemic. Severe depression also skyrocketed.
And rates of severe depression are 500% higher than prior to the pandemic.
Bergman says the most important thing we can do is check in with others.
We know that the conversations most likely to prevent a suicide are those among family, friends, and social networks.
If you or someone you know needs help, call the Access and Crisis Line for support at 888-724-7240. Alexandra Rangel, KPBS News.
With less than a week before the recall election, Vice President Kamala Harris campaigned with Governor Newsom in the Bay Area. The former California senator returned to her hometown of Oakland today in an effort to energize Newsom's base. She's the latest high-profile lawmaker to stump for the governor to alleviate concerns about Democratic turnout.
Fight for working people. We fight for organized labor. We fight for dreamers. We fight for women. We fight for voting rights. And we stand as Democrats saying we are proud to do all of that and more.
Thousands of ballots have already been cast across the state ahead of the September 14th election day. President Biden is expected to campaign with Newsom early next week. He should stay in prison. That's what the wife of the Robert Kennedy's murderer says concerning the possible release of assassin Sirhan Sirhan. 93-year-old Ethel Kennedy differs from the other family members concerning the future of the man convicted of killing her husband in California back in 1968. Two of his sons, though, support his release from Donovan Prison in East San Diego County. The California Parole Board found last month that Sirhan no longer poses a threat to society, but a final decision could come next month. San Diego County's tough eviction protection ended a few weeks ago on August 14th, and tenants are already feeling the effects. KPBS race and equity reporter Christina Kim says tenants are being legally pushed out as investors look to capitalize on the region's rising rents.
Frances Houston and her daughter Vanessa are packing up everything they own.
It's all packed up to leave, and I still have clothes in the closet, so we have to get more boxes, to put our things in. But that's about it. That's all we've been doing since they told us we had to move.
Last month, their new landlord said they had to leave their El Cajon apartment. It wasn't just them. Their apartment complex was sold to a new owner this summer. Shortly after, they, along with their neighbors, most of whom are immigrants or senior citizens on fixed incomes, were told their leases were being terminated to remodel the apartments. Vanessa Houston thinks there's another reason.
They can't say evict if you're doing, like Kovac or something like that, because people can sue. So what they're doing, they're saying, oh, well, let's remodel. Let's remodel and get these people out and raise the rent.
Up until mid-August, San Diego County had an eviction ban that prohibited landlords from pushing people out for reasons like remodeling. But that expired, and the statewide eviction ban's protections don't go as far. Houston currently pays $1,100 a month and can't afford to pay the $1,550 the apartment will cost after renovations. Raising rents after fixing up a place is common practice and perfectly legal, says Terry Moore, a landlord and the co-owner of ACI, a San Diego income property brokerage firm.
So for the last 40 years, the textbook solution was buy the building with the right things wrong with it. What are the right things? Well, if it's got ugly paint, if it has lousy management, has poor tenants, has poor landscaping, that's the right thing wrong with it. You fix that and you can rent it for more.
But right now, he says, things are different. After 30 years in the business, he's never seen such a high demand for apartment complexes. He says rents will continue to rise and believes building more apartment complexes will lower high costs, but not anytime soon and not in time for everyone.
Things are expensive in California and not everybody can afford to live in paradise.
Across the county in Chula Vista, more residents are being pushed out. Charles Canizales, a student, and his mother Gloria have lived in their apartment for 12 years.
I was born in this hospital right next to our house. I attended Vista Square Elementary School right in front of our door.
Like the Houstons in El Cajon, their apartment complex was sold to a new owner and they were asked to leave. Canizales says the new landlord took down their door numbers, took away their doorbells, and routinely turns off their water without proper warning. We reached out to the company Robert Stack & Associates, but they refused to comment. Canizales is worried about the toll it's taking on his parents.
My mom actually she got sick. She got shingles because of the stress, and that's really what worries me the most.
The Canizales don't want to go away quietly. Instead, they joined ACE, a local tenants group, and are demanding stronger tenant protections.
¿Qué queremos? Viviendas justas. ¿Cuándo? Ahora.
Gloria Canizales wants people to join together. She says that help is out there, and it's vital that community members rely on each other during these hard times, because united, they are strong. Meanwhile, in El Cajon, the Houstons are still packing up to leave. Vanessa is her mother's primary caretaker, and her federal unemployment check ended last week.
We're paying our bills on time. We're doing everything required, but we got to leave. And now I don't know where to go.
She's worried her credit score is too low to get another apartment and fears she and her mother could end up with no place to live. And with the last of the statewide eviction protections set to expire at the end of the month, the Houstons could be the first of many displacements on the horizon. Christina Kim, KPBS News.
On September 11th, 20 years ago, nearly 3,000 people were killed when terrorists crashed planes into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. The government now believes that more people died of 9/11-related illnesses than those killed in the attacks. A special report was released by the Justice Department on the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund on Tuesday. DOJ says more than 18,000 people who filed a claim listed 9/11-related cancers as one of their eligible conditions for compensation. That amounts to 48% of the claims that were filed. To date, the federal fund has paid out nearly $9 billion for more than 40,000 people. This year, the events of 9/11 may cause more distress in many Americans with feelings of sadness, grief, and anxiety. It's called the anniversary effect, and Mandy Gaither has more on how to cope.
It's one of those defining moments in time that changed the way that we think about the world.
20 years ago, the day America was attacked. As we count down to September 11th, the memories and the images may be overwhelming.
It really does hit you harder, especially when they're round number or big number anniversaries.
It's called the anniversary effect, an increase in distress around a traumatic event. Ken Yeager, director of the Stress, Trauma, and Resilience Program at Ohio State Wexner Medical Center, says this 9/11 anniversary may be even more troubling, especially with the turmoil in Afghanistan. If you're struggling to cope, Yeager says acknowledge those feelings, talk to someone you trust.
All of these are naturally occurring emotions, and rather than trying to avoid them, it's probably more important to name them and to call them out.
With 9/11 and in any tragic situation, Yeager says using coping skills can help.
Taking a walk, giving yourself time to sit and take a few deep breaths until you work through this, or just actually doing something to commemorate the tragic losses that occurred on that day.
And as a new generation is exposed to 9/11, Yeager says to remember to talk to your children, help them work through any feelings that may come up. For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
And within hours of the 9/11 attacks, a group of San Diego firefighters were on their way to Manhattan to help. Tomorrow on Evening Edition, we hear from two of them as they reflect back on a time that changed their lives and America forever. San Diegans and millions of Californians are feeling the heat, and with the high temperatures come power use warnings. In fact, a flex alert is underway right now, and it lasts until 9 o'clock tonight. State power grid officials are calling for voluntary conservation. For starters, you can keep your thermostat at 78 degrees or higher if health permits, and avoid using major appliances and unnecessary lights.
We're looking at some hot days ahead here across Southern California with heat advisories in effect and little to no monsoon moisture making it into the picture here. So as we look at those weather alerts, we have the heat advisories that were somewhat expanded since yesterday here, but they remain in effect for places like Ramona, Escondido, El Cajon, Mount Laguna, all the way through Friday evening. Temperatures as we move into tonight fall back down into the mid-60s over in Oceanside, getting down into the low 70s in San Diego, El Cajon getting down to 68, 80 degrees for your overnight low in Borrego Springs. The big picture story here for Thursday is going to be the dry heat across much of Nevada and Utah, but some spotty storms popping up across Arizona. Some of those are going to try to work their way into Southern California, but we're not going to see a whole lot in the way of shower and storm activity here. So as we look ahead to temperatures here for tomorrow, we're looking at 95 over in Ramona, 106 for you in Borrego Springs, Mount Laguna getting up to 78 degrees. Week trough arrives as we head into Friday, but it really only impacts northern portions of California. It looks like we're going to hold on to the heat here for Friday across Southern California. So near the coast, temperatures are going to be in the low to mid 80s, which is a good couple of degrees above what is average for this time of year. Further inland, we're going to be in the 90s here and not seeing a drop out of the 90s until we get into the start of the next work week. So certainly some hot days ahead. In the mountains, temperatures go up into the upper 70s for your Thursday, back down into the mid 70s with a thunderstorm possible on Friday, and then low 70s here Saturday, Sunday, and moving into the new work week on Monday. And in the desert, There's not much in the way of shower or storm activity here in the forecast. Temperatures just staying in the triple digits. So again, hot days ahead. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Jessica Pash.
Crews now have the upper hand on the Aruba fire burning near Rainbow. The wildfire broke out on Sunday, forcing evacuations in the North County area. Everyone has been allowed to return, and CAL FIRE says containment is at 90%. In all, about 54 acres burned, and the cause is under investigation. More people who fled the Caldor fire are returning to their homes near South Lake Tahoe. CAL FIRE is downgrading parts of El Dorado County to evacuation orders, evacuation warnings rather. At last check, the fire is 50% contained. It's burned more than 217,000 acres. CAL FIRE says the Caldor fire is still threatening more than 24,000 structures. 3 additional wildfires ignited in California over the weekend, adding to the record-breaking fire season. In addition to the major fires, drought is also threatening some of the state's most unique natural wonders, the giant sequoia trees. Stephanie Elam reports.
From their size, General Sherman is 275 feet tall. Holy cow. To their longevity.
You know, before ancient Rome, before Christ, I mean, these trees were mature.
Much about giant sequoia trees is on a grand scale. With that distinctive red-brown bark covering their thick trunks, sequoia trees can only be found in California's Sierra Nevada mountains.
This is a resilient tree. They are tough. Almost nothing can kill them.
But climate change is changing that, shrinking the giant sequoia's footprint.
A giant sequoia that was first weakened by drought was then subject to impacts by the bark beetle, which then further weakened the tree and potentially made it more susceptible to mortality from fire.
The stag tree is said to be the 5th largest tree in the entire world. It's lived more than 3,000 years. And yet we're seeing that wildfire is threatening these giant sequoias more than ever before.
The Castle fire was a wake-up call. An estimated 7,500 to 10,600 trees were destroyed in that one fire alone.
Started by lightning in August 2020, the Castle fire was part of the Sequoia complex that burned more than 174,000 acres, scorching several sequoia groves. It was devastating, heartbreaking. Everything had been incinerated. It was a field of the world's largest burned up toothpicks. After decades of suppressing forest fire, other trees and brush have grown rampantly around the sequoias.
The fires that used to burn every 5 to 10 years in the Sierra would just keep down the competition and reduce the fuel naturally.
On land owned by the Save the Redwoods League, we hiked out to see just how deadly the Castle fire was here.
For us to see 10 to 14% of the total of giant sequoias alive killed in 1 year in one fire there's nothing to compare that to.
Yet fire, in and of itself, is not the enemy of the giant sequoia.
Their cones open up, their seeds start to germinate after a fire.
So near those lost giants, where the fire wasn't too intense, small shoots of hope take root.
What I see is a lot of these little baby giant sequoias that have sprouted up since the fire happened.
Without an urgent response to the climate crisis and increased forest maintenance, experts worry more of the once seemingly impervious sequoias will be lost. The biggest worry for me is we have 2 fires burning right now that are threatening groves that we have not been able to treat. The risk is still there. Stephanie Elam, CNN, in the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Film Out, San Diego's LGBTQ Film Festival, returns to an in-person event tomorrow night with a film from Estonia called Firebird. KPBS cinema junkie Beth Accomando has this preview.
Firebird will be the in-person opening night feature for Film Out, San Diego's LGBTQ Film Festival. Actor, writer, producer Tom Pryor is excited to be coming to the festival and actually seeing the film with a live audience.
So it's amazing to experience live in person, people actually responding to the film.
And, you know, finding like these kind of moments where the film really holds people's attention, surprises them, or kind of makes them gasp. It's really, I'm very grateful that we've been asked to come and open the festival.
The film begins in 1977 at a Soviet Air Force base where a young soldier, played by Pryor, falls in love with a dashing fighter pilot.
Someone filed a report about us. What? They didn't mention your name, but the KGB knows something.
Pryor was drawn to the role of Sergei Fedosov, who is based on a real person.
Look, they're dancing with each other.
It really appealed to me on the kind of fascination of where friendship becomes something more. And that's always been like a line that's really fascinated me between two people, regardless of their kind of orientation or background, but really about kind of going like, like how does this become something else other than what it appears to be? The story is curious in how two kind of souls really kind of come together and are in this sort of like intertwined love in this very unusual circumstance.
Film Out kicks off tomorrow night with Firebird at the San Diego Natural History Museum, and then continues through Sunday at the Museum of Photographic Arts, with shorts, documentaries, and features from around the globe. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.